Breaking today, a massive sea change within both Buckingham Palace and Westminster about the future of Prince Andrew, about the action that is now being demanded from the King, both by senior courtiers, the country's top politicians, and his own son. As many royal insiders say, this also can't just be about Andrew. There has to be a reshaping of the British royal family, which also includes stripping princely titles and the right to use HRH status from Harry, Meghan, Beatrice, Eugenie, Archie, and Lily as well. But one man who has been completely behind the downfall of Prince Andrew is Andrew Lownie. He is the author of the Bombshell bestseller entitled, which really was the beginning of the end for the Duke. And he still is a Duke, despite this farcical announcement last week. Andrew Lownie, so great to have you back on Outspoken. There is a huge amount to get to today. This crisis is going, the political ramifications are vast. But I want to come to first this quite extraordinary information that you have, which you say will end up seeing Prince Andrew in jail. Now, that has been a prospect that has been a worst nightmare for King Charles and Prince William for the last decade. The deep state and the establishment have done their best to avoid it from happening. Why do you now think, Andrew, that everything has changed?
Well, I think it's literally changed over the weekend. I think the feeling was that the announcement on Friday really didn't go far enough. It was just a piece of window dressing. I mean, it should have come from the King. Andrew shouldn't have been allowed to get away with the sort of some of the claims he made. And public opinion is way ahead of the palace and indeed the government, rather like it was when Diana died, and the palace had to slightly swerve and respond to it. But you're absolutely right. It's no longer the problem of Andrew. It's the wider problem of the monarchy and how it has protected its own. I certainly found in my research that the palace were protecting Andrew. They were not taking any of the complaints that were made to the Queen or her secretaries. They weren't taking them seriously. Indeed, she was giving him honours each time he was quoted in some scandal. There were lots of complaints about his time as a trade envoy. He was exploiting his royal position for his own personal gain, and that was true also of Sarah Ferguson. And yet again, nothing was done. And I think the feeling of hope was that basically a deferential press wouldn't address this, and they could sort of, the news agenda would allow them to move on. But I think the public are pretty fed up with that approach. I think William has clearly seen the huge reputational damage to the monarchy from Andrew, and that the body politic has been infected by his diseased limb. And I think politicians, though they've had the sort of three-line whip not to talk about it, are increasingly getting pressure from their constituents to actually say that there must be legislation to rid him of these titles. I mean, it was a farce. Nothing really changed for him on Friday night. It's perfectly easy to get rid of these titles. Queen Marguerite of Denmark got rid of 4 princely titles for her grandchildren. They're letters patent. There are plenty of MPs who would give parliamentary time to this. There's huge public support, I think about 80% support for it. So, but I think the titles are only one part of the story. And as you alluded, I think the real question is whether he should face charges. And I think the charges on the Epstein case are more difficult to sustain, I think because of the age of Virginia Giuffre when she was here. But I think there's certainly a case for misconduct in public office, not just by getting his police protection officer basically to smear Virginia Giuffre, but also his activities as a special trade representative. And there are plenty of occasions which I outline in the book where he shoehorned in meetings when he was meant to be promoting British trade to promote either Jeffrey Epstein's business interests or David Rowland's. There are plenty of instances where he took a commission, not because he was promoting British trade, he was actually promoting a Greek water company. And these should have been investigated. There are plenty of court cases where mysterious large sums of money found their way into his account, and indeed Sarah Ferguson and one of the daughters, which can't be explained. And so I think, if if there's a proper investigation, I think they will find that there was financial corruption within not just a senior member of the royal family, but that was supported by the connivance of the institution itself. So I think we're in very serious territory here, probably the most serious royal crisis since 1936 and the abdication.
Indeed, because the prospect of a trial could obviously overshadow the end of the reign of Charles III and the beginning of the reign of King William V. But just to be very clear, you now believe that there is a realistic path to Prince Andrew ending up behind bars, ending up jailed.
Yes, I mean, clearly the Met have kind of fudged it in the past with investigations. The National Crime Agency were lobbied by MPs 20 years ago and nothing happened. But I've certainly offered information that I have, which couldn't go in the book, that I would give the National Crime Agency. I couldn't put in for legal reasons, but I think would give them some pretty strong evidence.
Okay, so to be clear, just want to be very, very clear on this. You're saying that you personally have evidence of new criminality conducted by Prince Andrew that you were unable to include in your book, but you have passed it on to the authorities.
I haven't passed it on to the authorities, but I'm offering to pass it on to the authorities. This may not be enough evidence to charge him with anything, but I think it should be investigated. I know that this evidence was passed to the Queen's private secretary, and the people who passed it were told that she wasn't interested. I think there's a very strong case here, and it's a question of getting people to give testimony and support it. But yes, I think there is a very strong case for him to be investigated. And of course, he should be making himself as a material witness available to law enforcement in the States. I know the Senate Oversight Committee are keen to talk to him. I think the lawyers of the victims would like him to come and talk. We've got to remember that when he actually ran away to Balmoral to get away from having any summons served on him, and clearly the release of these various emails in the recent weeks has shown that he has lied repeatedly about the extent of his relationship with Epstein. And I think the feeling is if he's lied about these things, which he was very adamant about on Newsnight, then what else is he lying about? This is a man who paid a huge sum to a woman he claimed never to have met, and has consistently refused to cooperate with anyone, even to give, as I say, evidence. He was staying in these houses on a regular basis. I have to say Sarah Ferguson was too, and she should be a witness. And yet they haven't volunteered their services here. So it does rather put a question of how deeply involved was Andrew in Epstein's operations.
And the big revelation for me from the Virginia Giuffre book, but again, we have to be clear, Virginia Giuffre made a lot of allegations, not all of them stacked up. Certainly her claims against Alan Dershowitz were not true, for example, but it is a shocking claim in the book, which you may have been aware of, but was the fact that one of these sex sessions with Prince Andrew was actually an orgy with Epstein, but also a number of young women, some of whom she seems to suggest, although she doesn't seem to know for sure, could have been underage. Do you have any idea if that is true, if that did happen? Because isn't it surprising, Andrew, that we haven't heard from the other women?
No, I mean, I don't think it is surprising. These were young girls flown in from Russia, often not being able to speak English. They were aspirant models, often from Jean-Luc Brunel's model agency. They will have disappeared into Russia. No one will be able to trace them. They probably can provide no evidence that they were on the island. There's no picture of them probably on the island. I mean, there may be records that Epstein kept, but it might be they're under false names. So I think it's very difficult to prove. This was an allegation she made in her own self-written book, The Billionaires Playboy Club, which people criticized and said it wasn't true. I think the fact that Amy Wallace has put it in, there was a lot of due diligence, and they were very, very careful for this book that everything should be fact-checked and be verified. And so I would believe everything that's in this book. I think it's very frustrating that names haven't been given, but I mean, there's some pretty clear clues to the identity of some of these men.
With the Prime Minister, she claims she was raped by a Prime Minister.
Yes.
Do you know who she's referring to?
Yes, I do. And that name has certainly been circulating on social media.
Is it a British Prime Minister?
No. Though Tony Blair was connected with Epstein, and we know that from a recent revelation about the meeting he had. I mean, clearly a very close relationship between Peter Mandelson. I mean, what I can say was that Tony Blair material was taken out of my book for legal reasons. So things are coming out literally on a daily rate. I think this story has a long way to run. I do hope the Senate Oversight Committee gets their final member ratified. Of course, there's been a huge attempt by Trump and his administration to shut this story down. But what I've also seen since the book came out is a much more emboldened press, victims prepared to come forward and talk. I think there was it 16 victims who went to talk on Capitol Hill. And I think some of those will begin to talk more openly. We have Juliet Bryatt's book, Blue Butterfly, coming out next month. So this story, it's going to be a tsunami of revelations. And I hope that some of these people, these perpetrators, will be exposed. But Andrew is very much on the ropes, and I think if he is going to go abroad, he should find somewhere that doesn't have an extradition treaty with Britain, or he will be spending time at Her Majesty's or His Majesty's pleasure.
Extraordinary. There has been a complete sea change at Westminster, even over the past 24 hours, Andrew. It's fascinating how fast this is moving. I feel like I'm pretty tapped into it. And even on Friday, people were sort of accepting of the original statement and thought, okay, maybe that will work. But no. There's been a big change. And there was a huge moment in PMQs today in the House of Commons. Now, Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, the third biggest party in the UK Parliament, raised this matter. It was very obvious that Starmer didn't want to go there. Of course, for a prime minister to be talking about the royal family in the House of Commons is just not what you want to do. It's not, he has a close relationship with Charles. But what was absolutely fascinating is under huge pressure, by the way, from his own backbenchers, but his own cabinet ministers as well, who really do think the government should be doing far more when it comes to removing Andrew's titles. He did concede, and you'll see it here, it happens pretty fast, but he did concede that at the very least there should be an investigation into what's going on in terms of Prince Andrew and Royal Lodge. Watch this.
Mr. Speaker, given the revelations about Royal Lodge, does the Prime Minister agree that this House needs to properly scrutinise the Crown Estate to ensure taxpayers' interests are protected? The Chancellor herself has said that the current arrangements are wrong. So will the Prime Minister support a select committee inquiry so all those involved can be called for evidence, including the current occupant?
Prime Minister.
Well, it's important in relation to all properties, Crown properties, that there is proper scrutiny. I certainly support that.
Massive moment.
Yes, that's very interesting. Well, it was a very cosy arrangement that had been made. It wasn't put onto the open market as it should have done. I mean, I've been trying to get greater parliamentary scrutiny of the royal family for years. And I think we are beginning to move to that. I mean, there was this convention that you couldn't ask questions about the royal family. And of course, that gave them the get out of jail free card. And if this is an encouraging sign. I mean, there are many more things I'd like to see. I'd like to see the exemption removed from the Freedom of Information Act. I'd like to see a royal register. I'd like to see the royal wills unsealed in future, unless for it's the direct line of succession. So I agree that the royal family is on the back foot. Things are moving at a rapid pace, and it's now drawing in the government. I'm sure it's the constituents who are putting pressure on the MPs that they actually need to basically make some parliamentary time. I would like a parliamentary investigation into Andrew's time as a special trade envoy, and to have the ambassadors who have not spoken, particularly those in Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, where he was up to a lot of mischief, and Ukraine, to have to give evidence on oath. I mean, I think it's appalling that these people have refused themselves to talk. They wouldn't talk to me. They haven't been talking about what was going on. And I think there's still a lot of pretty damaging material on Andrew to come out. And I think if it's been seen that the British government actually was turning a blind eye to some of these activities, that is, as you say, a very big story.
The other big story, of course, is that behind the scenes, there is tension between King Charles and his son, the heir to the throne, Prince William, over how to deal not just with Andrew, but the other wayward royals. And what seems to be happening, Andrew, certainly my sense of this, but I'm interested to know what you're hearing, is that William is increasingly winning this battle of wills. And what William wants is for Charles to actually go much further. He does want this letters patent, and it would mean not just stripping Andrew of the Duke title, but also his ability to even call himself Prince, which is, of course, something that dates right back to George V, I think in 1917. But he wants that stripped. But he also wants Beatrice and Eugenie, the two daughters, to be stripped of their princess title. But perhaps most significantly for William, given the trouble coming down the road, is he wants Harry, Meghan, and their two children, Archie and Lily, to also be included. Now, you can understand in a way why Charles is resisting this, because it puts him in arguably an impossible position with his son and with his brother. But I think, Andrew, this is now an absolute necessity. And Charles has to do this now because he's losing control.
Yep, I agree. I think that your analysis is absolutely right. William can see the problem. I think this would get ahead of all the problems that are coming up the path anyway. He doesn't. Has a much more sort of a detached view of the thing. He doesn't have clearly these sentimental attachments that Charles has. But, there are embarrassing bits about both Beatrice and Eugenie. Clearly, Harry and Meghan is a problem with their children. So I think that is the way to go, absolutely. I mean, William does want a streamlined monarchy, a much more European-style monarchy. I think we're in a transitional stage. William is calling more of the shots. Charles is looking at his legacy. William is looking at governance. And I think Charles is accepting that William's views should now begin to prevail, because we are probably moving, I would say, within the next few years to a new reign.
Yeah, indeed, because I think that is one of the pieces of context which is missing in the mainstream media, because they don't speak about Charles's health. I do. I try and do so sensitively. But of course, it's very difficult for William because he knows how close being on the throne might be, and he doesn't really want to come to the throne with all of these issues still outstanding. But look, I also want to speak about the relationships within the York family, because you've written for the Daily Mail saying some of his own family are now turning on him. And there's also reporting out of America via Rob Shooter, which suggests that even Sarah Ferguson, who up until this point has been completely loyal, might now be trying to get away. And also question marks over the daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, who are facing their own criticism. I guess for a long time, Andrew, the sort of narrative in the mainstream media was, oh, we've got to feel sorry for these two daughters. Again, that seems to be changing a little bit too. And there's a suggestion that maybe they are in some way complicit.
Yes,
is that unfair?
I mean, I think that is very fair. I mean, for example, money was being passed through one of the daughters' bank accounts in these unexplained sums in the Salman Turk High Court case. There have been various questions about Beatrice's involvement in the Middle East, her support for Saudi banks, some of their charitable activities are now under some sort of scrutiny. And so you're absolutely right. The narrative that was pushed was, we should feel sorry for them, they're innocent victims. They're not. I mean, they are very much part of the family. I think they're trying to distance themselves. I mean, I think it was interesting that Beatrice chose to go to Sandringham last Christmas rather than spend it with her parents. It'll be interesting to see what happens this Christmas. They've got their own business interests and their own charities, and I think they feel that their brand is actually being compromised by being associated with their father. I think also they're pretty shocked by some of the disclosures that are coming out. Sarah Ferguson's allegiance to Andrew was always connected with the fact he was a member of the royal family. She could live at Royal Lodge, and this, of course, gave her sort of cachet, particularly business-wise. I think once those things have gone, the attractions of Andrew, shall we say, are less attractive. So I think we will see her parting. I suspect she may go and live in Switzerland. And I think that Andrew may well disappear to somewhere like Abu Dhabi, where he has a palace. So there, as you say, these are rapid developments. I mean, the announcement was only on Friday, and here there's been huge bombshells every day. Royal Lodge is a problem. I mean, he can only be put out of there if he wants to go voluntarily. He has a repairing lease. He's put up £8.5 million. He will get some of that back under the terms of the lease. But, he says he's an honourable man. He wants to put country and monarchy first. Well, if that's the case, then he should be vacating Royal Lodge.
Why do you think he's so desperate to stay? I mean, given you've obviously revealed where he could end up, right? And it's sort of a palace in the Middle East. I mean, would that not be preferable to a country where you're effectively a prisoner in your own home, albeit a very lovely home?
I would have thought so. I mean, it's good weather. He could play golf. He could have his massages brought in. He would be treated royally by the other rulers there. He would have every extravagance. It would be a jet set life. So, in the way that, Juan Carlos, after his various problems, disappeared to Dubai, I think that would make a lot of sense. And in some ways, it would get round the problem if he was out of any sort of British jurisdiction. And in some ways, we'd never had to have a court case, which is clearly what he wanted with Virginia Giuffre. So, things may change. We just don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Just two final things, Andrew, and both are extraordinary in their own way. Do you think it's now just an accepted fact that William has the right to exclude both him and I think Prince Harry from his coronation? And who makes the decision over a funeral for King Charles? Because William will obviously be monarch at that point, and he seems to now have this new bottom line that no monarch should be pictured in public with Andrew. But would he have a right to ban Andrew from his own brother's funeral? I mean, that feels quite extraordinary.
I don't think so. I mean, funerals are arranged, by the wishes of the person who has died.
So it'd be Charles's call.
So he will set up exactly what sort of funeral he wants, a bit like he set up his own coronation, clearly with advice. I don't think you could stop Andrew attending his father's funeral. I mean, that would be pretty cruel. But
he can be banned from the coronation?
But yes, I mean, the Duke of Windsor, for example, didn't attend the coronation of the Queen. So I think we would see him disappear from public life, apart from those odd occasions. And he might choose not to appear at the funeral or to have some very, very low-key role. But I think the problem with Andrew, coming back to your question, is his whole status is contingent on being a royal, he calls himself a prince first, then a naval officer, then a husband. And that's the last thing he can hang on to, which is why he's trying to stay in Royal Lodge against all the advice he's been given and because of with the negative optics. But he's a very stubborn man. I mean, and he is feels very entitled. He feels this desire for droit de seigneur. He believes in divine right of kings. And so it's going to be very hard to persuade him. I think the only way to do it is to put pressure on him through whatever is going to happen to his daughters. He's very protective of them. And if he felt that somehow they would be penalized because of his behavior, he might change. I think also money, because I think the great worry is that Andrew or Fergie will find some Omid Scobie figure to tell their story. and they will have a lot of stories about the royal family. I think William's prepared to take that hit, but I don't think that Charles is prepared to do that. But you're absolutely right. They need to clean the stables before poor William takes over. He doesn't want to inherit this mess. I think there's a lot of public support for what the
Yes.
sort of suggestions that you've made,
Just
and it
do
would
it.
get ahead of the narrative.
Just do it. It's a really quick thing, actually, you know, because there's all of these arguments that are made by people close to Starmer or the palace. Oh, you know, we don't want to take up parliamentary time. Honestly, this could be done so quickly. It could be done so quickly if they wanted it to be done. But look,
Yeah.
absolutely incredible book, entitled, and I believe, Andrew, there is a new version with more bombshells, which will be on the way at some point.
Yes, next summer. I've already got 60 new pages, so it will be substantially different.
Amazing. Well, look, incredible historic book. So great to have you back on Outspoken, Andrew Lowney. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass in just one moment. First, to your feedback. Lots of you commenting on Mike Graham being suspended from Talk TV. Jose Pontes says, I hope he leaves, as Mike was the only person there with common sense. Terry Edmonds says they always get rid of the best ones. I was an avid listener, but they won't even mention Ben Habib or Tommy Robinson, and now Mike Graham gone. But Avto Matt 4774 says he's obviously not telling the truth. Come on, fellas, let's be honest here. Mike should just own it. So that's very interesting feedback, and we will be keeping on this story as the week goes on, of course. A reminder of your Union Jackass nominees today. Narinder Kaur, nominated by It's Only Me 44 for wanting GB News shut down over their coverage of Meghan Markle. Nadia Swala, nominated by Mother Clanger for her ridiculous rant about poor Palestinian men. And Jess Phillips, nominated by Sarah Booth for her hysterical response to the grooming gangs inquiry farce in the Commons yesterday. This one wasn't even close, folks. With 5% of the vote, Nadia Sawala. The runner-up with 13% of the vote, Narinder Kaur. But today's Union Jackass with an overwhelming 82% of the vote, that is one of our biggest votes ever, Jess Phillips. And the winner, on a very similar note, nominated by Lut Man's Sammy Woodhouse, who says she continues to fight for women and girls despite Keir Starmer and Jess Phillips' attempts to sweep the rape gang inquiry under the prayer mat.
The monarch and Queen Camilla made their long-awaited and much-celebrated arrival at the Vatican early this morning, marking the beginning of a day steeped in historic importance and solemn ceremony. It was on this occasion that the King became the first British monarch in over 5 centuries to join a pontiff in public prayer following his meeting with Pope Leo. Inside the magnificent Sistine Chapel, Charles and Camilla were seen bowing their heads in reverence as the sacred service began. The prayers commenced with the Lord's Prayer, spoken in English, while cardinals adorned in a vibrant array of robes and vestments filled the grand and echoing hall. Soon after, Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper stepped up to the podium to deliver the first reading of the day. Representing the Labour Party's front bench, she read a moving passage from the letter to the Romans, authored by St. Paul himself. The ceremony concluded with a prayer led by Pope Leo XIV, who intoned, God our Father, you have created the heavens and the earth, his voice resonating through the centuries-old chapel. Following the final benediction, the King and the Pontiff made their way out of the Sistine Chapel together, while Queen Camilla stayed behind for a moment longer to greet and thank the choir members personally. Earlier that morning, before the public service, the royal couple had spent time with the Pope in a private audience within the Vatican's ornate library. As the two men shook hands, King Charles appeared visibly touched and said with genuine warmth, Your Holiness, it is such a pleasure to meet you, if I may say so. Queen Camilla, dressed elegantly in a Philip Treacy mantilla, a delicate black lace veil, added softly, Lovely to be here. While posing for photographs, Charles expressed his joy, saying, I am so thrilled. The Pontiff, the King and the Queen shared a light-hearted exchange about the constant hazard of cameras, with the Pope smiling and remarking, You get used to it. In a gesture of respect and admiration, Charles then presented the Pope with what he described as a token of my esteem and appreciation. During the exchange of gifts, the king offered the Pope an exquisite icon of St. Edward the Confessor, the devout English king who reigned in the 11th century. He humbly referred to it as a small token as he handed it over. In return, Pope Leo presented the king with a finely crafted scale model of a mosaic depicting Christ, based on an original artwork displayed in a Norman cathedral located in Cefalù, Sicily. Earlier in the day, Charles and Camilla arrived at the Vatican in a grand motorcade led by a convoy of police motorcycles that escorted their car through the narrow streets before stopping in the courtyard of San Damaso. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by Monsignor Leonardo Sapienza, the regent of the prefecture of the papal household, alongside a ceremonial guard of honour formed by the Vatican's renowned Swiss Guard. Composed entirely of Swiss citizens of the Catholic faith, this elite corps has served as the personal protectors of the Pope for hundreds of years. Queen Camilla was dressed in a traditional black ensemble appropriate for the solemnity of the meeting, with a veil draped over her head and shoulders. As the royal couple entered the Vatican, the national anthem of Great Britain, God Save the King, echoed proudly across the courtyard. Standing side by side, the King and Queen received the ceremonial salute from the immaculately uniformed Swiss Guard before being led by Monsignor Sapienza into the Apostolic Palace for their private audience with the Holy Father. In addition to the audience, King Charles was also appointed as the Royal Confrater of the Papal Basilica of St. Paul's outside the walls in Rome, an honour described by the Vatican as a gift bestowed in recognition of spiritual fellowship. To mark the Prosidin 95 ODT occasion, the Basilica has designed a special chair to be used by the King during future visits, symbolising continuity for him and his successors. This official visit to the Holy See, the sovereign jurisdiction of the Roman Catholic Church, holds deep personal significance for the King. It coincides with the celebration of the Papal Jubilee, a sacred event observed every quarter century. The trip had originally been planned for the month of April, when Pope Francis, the late predecessor of Pope Leo, was still in office. However, it had to be postponed due to health concerns. The royal couple met privately with Pope Francis shortly before his passing, later that same month. Robert Francis Prevost, aged 70, ascended to become the 267th successor to St. Peter's throne in the month of May of this year, assuming the name Leo XIV. Born in the city of Chicago in the United States, he carries a heritage that blends Spanish and Franco-Italian roots. Before his elevation, Pope Francis had appointed him as prefect of the dicastery for bishops in the year 2023, and later conferred upon him the rank of cardinal.